The 2023 BMW X1. The X1 is all new for the 2023 model year, and they've done quite a bit. This is BMW's entry-level product into their SUV lineup. This vehicle, as tested in xDrive 28i form, has a base price in the high 30s, and as tested, you're looking at in the mid $46,000 range. So what do you get? Well, you get a entry-level front-wheel drive BMW SUV. And they clearly have prioritized the interior space. We're going to talk through some of the technical details on the shop, and we're going to take this for a drive later, but let's talk about the interior and exterior. The exterior styling of this vehicle is basically a giant box with two kidney grills in the front and a BMW badge with BMW taillights and headlights. Do you like the styling? Well, I'll leave that up to you, but because of its boxy shape, it has led to a fairly roomy interior cabin. Yes, this is not the largest vehicle in the world, but you have a lot of glass. You have a fairly squared off trunk space, which means with the rear seats up, you get about 26 cubic feet of total cargo capacity. And with the rear seats down, you're looking at in the mid 40s, which for the size of the vehicle is pretty decent. It is a fairly usable vehicle. So if you have a small family or if it's just you and some pets, you should have more than enough space. Interior styling. Well, you can argue that in some ways it's a bit generic BMW. At the price point, they've done their best making this feel like more like a luxury product. So you have interesting designs in the door, whether it be the grille work on the Harbin Kardon speakers, or the leather contrasting, or the leather design with the contrast stitching. It all looks, at least when you're sitting in the driver or passenger seat, fairly expensive. Where you see cost cutting is the bottom areas of the door. Some of the switchgear definitely does not feel anywhere as expensive as the more premium BMW products, but that's to be somewhat expected, at least at this price point. Interior electronics. This is running the latest generation of iDrive. Gone is the D-pad and all the physical controls, and now everything is touch. We've talked about in other videos, this is going to be the standard version of iDrive you see in pretty much everything as they refresh all their current products, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. While the tile system works well, and if you are used to smartphones, it's fairly intuitive. That's definitely what they're trying to mimic with this operating system or infotainment system. But I miss the physical controls. You find yourself tapping and swiping far more than you used to. And the fact that all of the physical HVAC controls are gone is, to say the least, a bit of a bummer. There's also a ton of piano black in this cabin, but that's to be expected in most modern BMWs. Again, they are prioritizing your usability in this interior space. So they're nice nooks and crannies like underneath the armrest, you have big door pockets, and wowing you with the latest technology and interior design. Do you prioritize what they're doing? Do you find value in that? I'll leave that up to you. But with that, I think it's time for us to head in the shop and put this thing up on the lift.
Welcome to BMW Town. How come you don't have your BMW Blazer on?
Well, Mark, I reserve that for true BMW products that aren't front-wheel drive based. This is on the UK L2 platform. This is the same global architecture that BMW shares with Mini. So things like the Countryman are on this platform and some of the other Mini Cooper products. We get a different variant than the rest of the world. While it is on the same architecture and is principally the same vehicle, we don't get all of their drivetrains. We get the B48. Sadly, it's not the B58.
That's 10 short. You don't like that?
Yeah, so this is their 2-liter. It's a turbocharged 4-cylinder and it only comes as all-wheel drive currently in this market. Elsewhere in Europe, where this thing is primarily sold, you can get diesels, you can get hybrids, you can get a 1.5-liter 3-cylinder engine. So we get one configuration here in this market. As I talked about in the beginning of this video, the X1 is now all new, so it has a longer wheelbase, it has different suspension geometry, it has more rigid steering, it has less NVH that makes its way into the cabin. It's a more premium platform than it used to be, but it is still an on-demand all-wheel drive system that is front-wheel drive biased. And if you get the M Sport model, you get adaptive dampers. We don't have that. We have passive dampers, but we do get the M Sport seats with their more aggressive bolstering. But past that, I mean, what do you think looking at this?
I mean, you would never know it's a BMW just looking underneath here. I mean, it's covered up essentially the same way every other car is covered up. The only giveaway that it's a BMW may be the knuckle design, that the way the strut's attached, but everything else is steel. I mean, you can tell this is their compliance, like, platform cost-effective platform to get people into the brand at a lower entry point, and the price really isn't that bad, around 38 grand to start for what you get.
And it's German built. It's not like it's not built in Mexico or the United States. This is a German built car, and you get a dual clutch.
Yeah, that's true if that's what you're into. But the people that are buying an X1, to be fair, don't care if it's front or rear wheel drive. It has an on-demand all-wheel drive system that's pretty capable. It's got a clutch-based rear differential that works with a pump, so it can unslip and slip those clutches. I mean, it is what it is here, and really at 38 grand or 40 grand or whatever you want to say, it's basically the same of what we're seeing with every other brand, if not better in most ways.
Yeah, what your money is going towards is the interior, the badge, and the fact that they really did try to reduce NVH making its way in the cabin, given the fact that this is a budget platform. Like, the exterior shape of this car, while it is essentially big brick, does have a coefficient of drag of 0.27, and their whole point of that is fuel economy and less wind noise. So they are trying.
And if you're in a different country that doesn't get the 2-liter, I would say, just before we get into the drive, I almost wish we had a diesel or a hybrid option of this, because I feel like it would match the character more of what this is trying to be, to get the fuel efficiency out of it, because you're not going to drive this like a monkey. No. So it's kind of weird, but again, we're not the primary market for this. We always get the more horsepower usually than anybody else.
All right, Mark, with that, let's go take this for a quick drive.
All right. X1 dual clutch, 4-cylinder turbo jack.
Mark, what I did earlier was I defeated the iconic sounds or the fake engine noise for you.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, see, I like that in this car. If you really want to hear the sweet sound of synthesis, you can, or you can turn it off.
Too bad it doesn't have the electric car synthesis sound.
I think, Mark, this is a weird car because it's clearly not prioritized for the United States, or at least North America. The vast majority of the sales are done elsewhere. Asia and Europe, because it makes more sense for the roads and all that other fun stuff. But here in the United States, this is their entry-level SUV. What do you feel, or how do you feel about driving this thing? Because you've spent more time in this than I have.
I spent a lot of time in this, and it's a mixed bag, because obviously for the price, you don't have a high level of expectation for starting at 38 and you get into the 40s, of course, with this. And what you realize right away is it's not a traditional like BMW product. It's much like the front wheel drive car that we drove, the 2 Series or whatever it is. I expected the same type of driving character that did, and it didn't bother me, but in here it bothers me more. I think some of it is because it's lifted up a bit more. It really hurts the dynamics of it, more so in corners, because this is the first BMW that I can remember that has a ton of torque steer. Like, if you're turning and throttling, you're feeling it pulling. The other thing too is I'm like, well, it's got a dual clutch. I mean, that should make it more interesting, but it really doesn't do anything other than, I think it makes it worse. It has a very jerky first to second gear shift, and sometimes in second and third it does crazy stuff, like goes into a disengagement mode and then like does this, gets herky-jerky. I mean, it's not right. And I think the one thing that bothers me even more so than that, I can get over that, because all right, you're not foot to the floor in every corner or from a dead stop, but from a dead stop trying to merge, when the start-stop system activates, if you're not in a sport or something, like this car just like almost stalls to get from a stop. Like, it will not restart properly, and the dual clutch will not engage to the point where you have a dead zone for like 2 seconds.
And it could just be the version we're in, or this drivetrain. Europe and other countries get different engines than we have, but our turbocharged gas 4-cylinder with the all-wheel drive and this dual clutch has some drivability issues, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but I would rather have the ZF. I would rather have a traditional automatic in here, because I just don't think it's right. It doesn't feel right to me.
Or like the Aisin that was in the 2 Series Grand Coupe we drove. The other thing I will say in my brief amount of time in this car is it's one of the few BMWs I've driven where I notice there's a huge disconnect between body motions and steering. The steering off-center is really fast, but there's a lot of body roll in this car.
Yeah.
So when you combined the roly-poly body with the really fast off-center feeling, it almost feels like there's a disjointed feel between the front end and then what the body does, which doesn't normally happen in a BMW product.
No, it doesn't, and I think a lot of that is because this is it's front wheel drive, and just going
front wheel drive bias, all wheel drive.
Right,
Yeah.
but I mean, still, you know, like this is the first car I get in where it's like it's not doing BMW things. Like it hits that point of like, okay, I have grip, now I'm taller up, and now I have stability control cutting in. It just doesn't feel natural. And we talked about this in the Integra and the Mazda 3 video, right? Two front wheel drive platforms. The Mazda 3s, all the inputs matched up. Mm-hmm. Like this has this crazy fast steering where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm in a sporty car. And then you start to turn and operate it. That steering almost upsets the dynamics of the car because not everything is more one-to-one. And obviously, we're talking about an X1 here.
Yes.
We're talking about some CUV thing. It's not top priority in terms of engineering and tuning for this company, I'll be honest. So, I mean, I don't have crazy high expectations of them getting this like dialed in like a 3 Series or a 5 Series. So I'm just talking about it generally.
As a luxury product, though, right? Because if you're buying one of these things, you're buying it because you want the premium badge, right? You don't want a CRV. You don't want, you know, a RAV4 or something. You want the premium badge. You like the interior styling. You like the prestige associated with it. How does it do as a regular just, I turn my brain off, I want to be in a luxury car, I want to sit in traffic, I want to get good fuel economy, I want it to be quiet?
I mean, it's pretty decent overall. I would say some of the things are great and some of the things are really average. I think the interior space makes this car feel way more special than it does.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You know, if they had the last generation interior and just kind of like more commodity thing, I would say this feels like everything else. But I think that the interior does have a huge factor on the perception of this being more luxury than it really is.
I think the 4-cylinder, it's the corporate 4-cylinder you've seen from BMW in the past, gets good fuel economy. It really does get good fuel economy.
Yeah, it does.
28 miles per gallon in the city, you're looking at low to mid 30s on the highway. When you are in gear, when you don't have to deal with some of the weirdness of the dual clutch, it builds power relatively smoothly, but between gears it feels relatively peaky, but it does mean it feels like it's got power.
Yeah, it does. I'm gonna turn real quick here, just from a stop, and just see if it. See what I'm talking about? I was foot to the floor, literally, and like nothing was happening. I mean, it's just, again, it's repeatable things like that just drive me crazy about this thing, and I don't know.
The stop start is a big.
It's actually a problem.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would say that this car should be going back in for a TSB or a recall for that level of problem. Like, to come to a stop and have your foot to the floor and nothing happening for seconds is not, to me, it's a safety issue. And you know, I don't know if it's just this car, and we get into many cars where there's transmission issues and weird problems with
Press cars live a bad life.
Yeah, so I don't really want to say it's like all of them, but again, you can only speak to the one that we're driving.
It rides reasonably for how short wheelbase it is. The seats are great. Interior is nice. Drivetrain has its issues. So it depends on what you value in a car like this,
Yeah.
Mark. But I think it's time for us to head into the final thoughts.
Sounds good, Jack. Final thoughts on the BMW X1. As you could tell by the drive, there were some things about this that turned me off from a mechanical perspective driving it. We talked about it in the shop as well. The 2-liter, while it makes enough power, doesn't really match the character of what this should be. And it's not that it has a problem with the exterior or the interior. Those are great. The NVH, all the refinement part is good, but this is probably a first, I'm gonna say this, the GLB, the internal combustion version, is actually better to drive than this. The XC40 has more character, it's more clean on the inside, and I feel like in some ways the drivetrain is better than this. So that leaves you with like the Q3, and you probably know what I'm gonna say already. They're very even, but I'd almost take the Audi. So this, to me, it kind of just blends in with all the others. It doesn't do anything great, and it doesn't do anything particularly terrible. So it's just, do you want BMW as a brand? Do you want a front-wheel drive BMW? And do you like the interior? That's where you're gonna spend the most time. So that's kind of where I'm left confused. I don't really have an answer, but the one thing I don't like is the drivetrain. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.